Welcome to Safe on Deck. Episode 8 is part 2 of my interview with Major General John Miller. The General graduated from Clemson University in 1968 and entered the U.S. Air Force as a distinguished graduate of the Reserve Officer Training Corps program. After earning his wings in May of 1969, he flew both the F-105D Thud and the F-105G Wild Weasel for 126 combat missions, 86 of which were over North Vietnam, as one of only 2 first lieutenants to become a Weasel pilot during the Vietnam War. As a captain and a U.S. Air Force Fighter Weapons School graduate, he was a multiple-time Top Gun winner and led Air Force gunnery teams to victory in 2 international fighter competitions. Generals commanded the 4450th Tactical Squadron, the first operational squadron of the stealth fighter, the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, the Wolfpack, the 49th Fighter Wing, and the 57th Wing. And in 1994, he was selected as Air Combat Command's Outstanding Wing Commander. General is a command pilot who's logged more than 3,600 hours in 8 different, mostly single-seat fighter aircraft, including the A-7 Corsair II, the F-117 Nighthawk, and the F-16 Fighting Falcon. He's accumulated over 5,300 total hours in 46 different aircraft types and 59 different type models, ranging from the B-29 Stratofortress to the MiG-29 UB Fulcrum. After retiring from the Air Force in 1999, the General built a Vans RV-10 and a Vans RV-8 airplane. He continues to instruct select primary and instrument flight students as an FAA-licensed certificated flight instructor and has provided nearly 1,300 hours of flight instruction. Thanks again for taking the time to listen. In the future, I plan to continue to share similar interviews with both current and retired military aviators. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future interview, please leave it as a comment below. Safe on Deck, Episode 8, Part 2, with Major General John Miller. Enjoy.
There was one more A-7 story I needed. Actually, 2 more A-7 stories, I'll tell you.
Okay, let's start with that.
First one was, I told you I was a fighter weapons school graduate. Okay, and this was in about 74 or so. The Air Force was running a program called Have Idea, where we were running U.S. Air Force airplanes against captured MiGs.
Okay.
So I got to do a test plan for the A-7 versus the MiG-17 and the MiG-21.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is long before what I'm familiar with, which is the 4477th.
Yeah, this is long before that.
Okay.
So that was a very interesting time. We wrote a tactics manual based on what we had done. We did about 2 weeks of it.
Was it you leading that team?
Yep.
Okay. How many folks? How many airplanes?
4 ship.
Wow.
4 airplanes against 4 MiGs. Combination of 17s and 21s.
Okay.
And so we were trying a bunch of different tactics to see what would work, what would not work. And the one thing about the MiGs is the engagement's not going to last long because they all ran out of gas real quick. And then, of course, the guys that were flying the MiGs were Air Force guys, right? So they A-7, okay, this will be easy. This won't be hard. Well, the A-7 was actually pretty good if you knew how to fly the airplane. Just was thrust limited. So there was one a good friend who's retired now. He retired as a 3-star. He was flying MiG-21, and we were into this vertical rolling scissors. And I'm gunning him. Of course, he's an afterburner. He's at least holding his hold. And he's looking at me and said, "That airplane can't do that."
But in fact, it was.
But in fact, I'm sitting there. I'm keeping it from departing because A-7 would depart.
Okay.
And
was it a very quick departure?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just out of nowhere. There was no buffet or anything leading it. Just go right into OCF.
It would tell you if you had been trained for it, you'd know when it was coming because you would slide sideways in the seat just before it snapped.
Really?
Well, the Air Force lost a number of A-7s early on, departure, low altitude departure. Guy hits the ground and gets killed.
Yeah.
And when I was in weapons school, they they taught us and let us teach departures. But the rest of the Air Force couldn't do it. So we finally pushed and pushed, and then we finally got to where the Air Force allowed us to teach departure training in the active duty units.
Okay.
So it was always fun to go up and teach somebody and watch them tumble.
And are you in a 2-seat jet?
Nope. I'm chasing.
You're chasing and you're talking them through what maneuvers to fly to go
to get it to go out of control.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously a very good thorough brief, and then you're providing instruction air to air.
Yep.
Holy moly. Okay.
Yep. And the airplane was, depending on the entry speed and the amount of G's you pulled on it, the aircraft would tumble, or it would sort of a 30 to 40 degree azimuth off of where you went into it, like that.
Okay. So turnover. Okay.
But in all cases, the airplane always ended up nose low.
Okay. Is it idle neutral to recover or something?
You just let go.
Just let go. Okay.
Just let go.
Okay.
Then, and of course, we always did that at altitude, so there was enough altitude to recover.
Sure.
Well, once we did that, we never had another, and we got everybody trained in the A7, and then as people came through the pipeline, new pilots, they got departure training. We never had any more crashes due to departures in the A7. But we lost a number of guys before the Air Force finally woke up and said, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off mid-story of you and the MiG, but that's interesting to know that was the. I'm glad someone learned the lesson, and I'm glad it ended there.
Well, we fought long and hard, those of us who had been trained, the few of us that had been trained, to get that into the syllabus of Tactical Air Command. Let us teach that to the operational units. Of course, there was, we don't know how this is going to do it. Well, let us try it a couple of guys. So, we finally broke the dam and the water flowed. The other one I wanted to tell you about in A7, we talk about mechanical failures. Right? This was a day down in Louisiana where it's about 400 feet, 300 or 400 feet. That was our minimums if you were a Category 1 pilot was 301. Not 200.5, but 301.
Okay.
And it didn't look like it was going to get any better all day. And finally, the DO made the decision, well, let's launch a 4-ship and see how it goes. So guess who's leading the 4-ship, right? So we get out on the runway, and because it's raining and stuff, no formation takeoff. So everybody's single ship, 20-second spacing on the guy in front of you. And you follow procedures till you break out on top.
You don't? Do you have a radar in the A7?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
No radar.
Nope.
Wow. So you're not locking a guy up?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Not like an F-16 or an F-15 or an F-4. No.
That's where my head was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, so it's procedural.
Wow.
You take off, accelerate to a given airspeed, hold that airspeed, and if the lead goes out 3 miles and turns right to 090, at 3 miles, I say, lead would say, right turn 3 miles, 090. Everybody go to 3 miles, right turn to 09. And then you always level 500 feet lower than the guy in front of you. Okay?
Yep. So you're deconflicted by both altitude and time and space.
Correct.
Okay.
So anyway, I was leading. Crappy weather. Come on, guys. I really don't want to do this. Yeah, the DO wants to find out. So, all right. I roll down the runway, rotate, lift off. About the time I get the gear and flaps in the well and I go in the weather, I lose all attitude, everything.
Okay.
Holy crap. Damn it. It's my turn. So all we had a little standby attitude indicator. We call it a peanut gauge over here. And then you had your altimeter and your vertical speed. That's it, and a magnetic heading. Rats, it's my turn, Generator, no, that doesn't work. Nothing. The electrics are working. It's just the whole inertial platform and everything went out. So I said, no biggie deal. I'll climb up on top, have them join with me, and I'll get on the wing and come back. I can't get on top. Then I'm in a thunderstorm. It's raining and lightning. And the radio starts going scratchy, and I go, this is not good. So I said, I think I'm going to go back. Well, how are you going to get back? Well, I think I know about where I am. So I started heading back over and started a descent down. I finally get enough radio contact where I can talk to my controllers and said, give me a no gyro GCA. Okay. Come back around. I break out at about 200.5. The rest of my flight spent the next 2 days in Houston. They couldn't get on top at 24,000 feet.
Oh my!
So
gosh.
they were three guys
spread out.
Spread out.
Where's lead?
Yeah, where's everybody? Of course, they didn't. All they heard me was saying, I got a problem. I got to go back.
Yeah.
But when I went past 12,000 feet, and now I'm in a thunderstorm and I'm not on top, what was supposed to be a 6,000 or 8,000 foot overcast, lead's gone. Who's leading this thing? Nobody.
Yeah. Who does it fall to? Is it -2, -3?
Whoever the deputy flight. You always
deputy flight lead.
Usually it's number 3.
That's what I thought. Yeah, because 2's on your wing as lead, and 4 is on 3's wing. So
and usually 3 is the next most
senior
qualified flight lead.
Okay.
If you will.
Wow.
And the 2 and 4 are usually wingmen, not qualified as flight lead.
You mentioned dragging through the weather. Was that something y'all would do a lot if you had, like you said, you were stuck above the weather? Okay, I'm going to join on the more capable aircraft. They'll shoot the approach, drop me off, and then they go back into the weather and come back around again.
Yes, we did a lot of that in Europe, and that was a quick way to get down in a wartime environment. But the difference over there was you would typically land on the wing. In other words, do a formation landing.
Which has been removed recently from the syllabus. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Don't get me into stupidity things again.
My mistake. I'll stop.
About basic airmanship.
Yes.
But what we would do is, before we did that in Europe, if you had a major problem in your airplane, and whether or not you could talk on the radio, there was hand signals you could, I'm radio silent. I want to land on your wing.
Yeah.
You've got the lead.
Yep.
So that in that case, what you do is you bring the person down on a GCA approach typically, or an ILS, whatever it is. And when you as the leader, you say, okay, there's a runway environment, you go.
Yep.
Because this guy is not looking out in front. He's looking at you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're his whole world.
And if he doesn't give you that, you just stay right there on the wing. So, that had been a thing for fighters forever.
Okay.
And it wasn't until the European thing when we tried to think about how do we get airplanes down quicker, because you never know who you might rendezvous with. It might be a Jaguar, or it could be at the time a Buccaneer, or pick a 104 or whatever that NATO countries were flying. You get in a big melee, and all of a sudden, hey, here's a friendly airplane. I need to get down. I can't talk. You use the standard hand signals, and then you could give. And if you give the fist, that was a basic 150 knot final. Okay, because you remember you had a 104. 104 was very fast. So the standard was 150 knots, and if I gave the closed fist and then one figure, that's meant 160.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So you could on any NATO partner, you could end up on the wing of a partner. And give them the hand signals, even if you can't talk to them, and they would lead you to the nearest base on final at that approach speed. And then once the lead saw the runway and you could land, he'd give you the signal. You got the
Sure.
There you go.
The reason I ask about that is, again, as a helicopter guy, in the 53 we didn't form much at all, but even when we did, I've gone double IMC in as a formation once, and probably the scariest moment of my life when I thought I was going to fly into another 53. And in the T6, however, we've got obviously a lot more fixed wing guys. Fixed wing is just a different world. You can get closer and you can drag someone through the weather. The reason I ask is that something where, have you ever been dragged either up or down through the weather and then literally lost sight of lead? And I know there's a procedure for that to get away from one another.
Yes.
But you have. Okay.
And there are procedures, and those were ingrained from your earliest days going into a fighter unit. Of if you lose sight, you go lost wingman.
Correct.
And it's different if you're straight and level.
Vice in a turn.
Vice in a turn. Okay. It's different if you're on final. In other words, you're shooting an approach and you lose sight. But the basic gist of it is you turn away from where your leader's heading was, you reduce power slightly, and you gain altitude separation. In the case if you're going down an ILS and you lose sight, the lead's still going down, so you don't want to go down. You want to hold level or even start climb and turn away.
Okay.
So it depends on where you are when you lose sight of the leader.
That makes sense. I'm just again, as a helicopter guy now doing fixed wing things again, I haven't done my form qual yet, but it seems like a very, just the idea of penetrating the weather. I've done it in the backseat of another T6, and the guy I was flying with was a former F-18 guy, and without even saying a word, he just snuggled right up, and the visibility came down. I actually have a GoPro video of it, and the whole time I'm thinking, well, I guess this is what we're supposed to do, but I've never done it before. It's a very, very humbling, but a really awesome capability.
It's actually, it's a fun way of flying, because when you break out, for example, in Europe, where we flew out of, in Europe, the wintertime was always crappy weather. And it was not at all unusual that they'd be calling 301, which was the normal peacetime, and it'd be 200.5. But we can't call it 200.5. But is to be on the wing. You get on the wing at 20,000 feet. You get into the weather. You do the whole TACAN penetration or whatever, pick up to a GCA control final, and you're on the wing. You see nothing until you flare for landing on your half of the runway.
Wow. Yeah, on your half. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. It's got to be a really, really awesome feeling.
It certainly builds confidence in your ability as an aviator.
For sure. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you brought those up before I moved past, because I wanted to talk about June 1985, and I think you know where I'm talking about in the desert next. But how did you get the call? How did you find out? What was that process like when you were picked to fly the F-117?
Well, again, I was in the standardization evaluation unit at USAFE headquarters. So my boss was the USAFE DO. And for a while, I'd keep badgering him about, boss, when will I get to go to a squadron, F-16 squadron here? Because,
You're itching for it.
I'm itching for it. Just hold your horses. So I'm deployed with the squadron I fly with out of Han. We are in Turkey, going down there for a weapons training detachment. We either went to Turkey or down to Spain, where we had a lot of freedom to do low-level bomb dropping, that kind of stuff. And the weather was a hell of a lot better, especially in the winter. So I'm down there and come back from that, and I get the call. The office secretary said, "Hey, the General Kirk wants to see you." So, yes, sir. Said, "You got that squadron up at Han for me?" He looks at me and says, "Well, I got a squadron for you, but it's not at Han." "Oh, okay. Is it Torrejon?" "No." "Is it Aviano?" "No." "Is it in Europe?" "No."
Where am I going?
And he says, "I can't tell you very much, but you got to go get recurrent in the A7. And they want you there." Now, this was early December. "They want you there in 2 weeks." I said, "Boss, can you tell me any more about this? And is it a hard and fast date in 2 weeks? I got my parents coming over for Christmas. They already bought their tickets. We'd planned these things in Christmas." And he said, "Well, I don't know. I'll ask about that. But I can't tell you anything about where you're going." And he says, "There is one cue I will give you. It's called, go figure out what RCS means." Okay. So I'm going home.
There's no internet, so you're going to a library, I'm guessing, or asking around?
No, I knew what RCS was from my Weasel days, right?
Okay. Radar cross-section.
I'm going, what the heck's going on? And I knew some of the guys that had gone to Nellis and just sort of disappeared, that were A7 friends from A7s.
Okay.
So I stewed about it, and the next day he said, "Okay, I got you delayed. You can be in Tucson in January for your Class 8 recurrence."
Perfect.
Another 5-ride checkout, right? And I said, "RCS, huh?" So I know you won't tell me, but does it have to do something with low observables? He goes, smiles. So all I could tell the family was we're going to be, squadron commander was going to be in Las Vegas.
Was that a desirable location for the family, or probably not?
Not really.
Okay.
We'd live there.
It's not Europe. It's not
the
wonders of Germany.
They were expecting to spend a couple more years in Germany, running around Europe, being on the Mosel River with good wine and great, food and stuff.
Sure.
Castles and all sorts of stuff. Las Vegas, no.
Could you have passed on it? Sorry to interrupt the story, but is that something where you can say, hey, boss, actually, no, I'd rather something else? Or is that not really how that works?
Well, you could say no, but
you
don't expect him to call you again.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So you're pressing the I believe button in a big way.
And he says, trust me. He said, this will be good. It's not what you're expecting, but this will be good. I said, oh, yeah. So my mind wandered back to the A7 stuff that I'd done, and when I'd done the MiG stuff, and all sorts of stuff's running through my head.
Were there still so I keep interrupting, I apologize. Were there still operational A7s in the Air Force, or were they mostly Guard units at that point?
Mostly Guard, but the only active were at Las Vegas.
So did you think at some point maybe you were going to be the CO of that unit, potentially? RCS is probably the one thing that threw that off, but...
The unit actually turns out had both.
Okay.
The A7 was our, we call it our advanced trainer. That was our cover story.
Okay.
But that allows it, because the early part of the airplane was the 117, you didn't get much flying time. Okay, because it was infant, right?
Yeah.
So the way we kept people current was flying the A7. And most of that was done at night. And our cover story was a avionics development test stuff we were working on.
Okay.
Because we knew when we fly the 117, it would be at night.
Exactly.
So I got recurrent, went back, picked up the family, came back States, stalled the family, picked up the truck, et cetera, drove to Las Vegas. When I got there, they said, well, it's going to take about 60 days before you'll have the change of command. So we got an ORI, the first operational readiness of there was 8 airplanes in the squadron, by the way. We got to get that passed, plus you have to get through your checkout. So got all of that done and got my checkout. And
what did they tell you? When did you see the 117 and here's the thing, I guess the point I'm trying to make. This airplane was not known in the real world.
Nope.
There were a couple nerds out with long camera lenses at Nellis or at Tonopah that maybe saw something weird, but it was never acknowledged. Years later, it was acknowledged, but this was a totally secret program for a number of years. When did you first see the airplane and know that's what you were going to fly?
Well, when I went to Tucson, and I was there for about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, by the time get through. Well, they brought me up to Las Vegas. At the time, the unit had some Mitsubishi's MU-2s that they used for administrative hauling around stuff. So they came down, picked me up. I go to Las Vegas. They run me in to take a lie detector test.
Okay.
So I take a lie detector test, And
Was that your first one, I'm guessing?
First time, yeah.
Okay.
So then it's, okay, you go to the squadron where they operated out of on Las Vegas, the white world part of it.
Correct.
And I go back into the vault. And there's a couple of my old friends. One of them was a college buddy from mine, and he'd gone from A7s, he'd gone to A10s. And then, there's 3 of my old friends there. And they went, well, we're going to read you in, but first we're going to show you what it is we're reading you into. So they showed me a video. And I almost threw up. I look around the room, and they all laughing their rear ends off at me.
I'm sure.
I said, that's the ugliest airplane I've ever seen. I don't want to fly that piece of junk. So that was my introduction to what it looked like.
Okay.
And to think that I was giving up a squadron of F-16s on the Mosel in Europe, to come fly at night in a place away from, I wouldn't see my family for 5 days a week. That, somehow that didn't.
That's tough.
That didn't make me real anxious about the assignment. So, got checked out, got the squadron commandership was given to me. They had 8 airplanes and about 12 pilots at the time.
And this was, sorry, I keep interrupting. This was the first operational squadron of
Correct.
the F-117. You were
Correct.
the first CO
No, I was the second CO
Second
of
CO.
the first squadron.
Second CO of the first squadron.
Right.
But the first CO, like you said, still building the tactics, still building the procedures, very, very new. You had, when you walked in, had 8 airplanes. I'm guessing did more come as time went on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things were really starting to happen as you kind of, unbeknownst to you, timed that really well, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, for whatever reason, the timing was probably pretty good because the old CO walked out with having passed
The ORI.
a very small focused ORI because nobody at inspectors office, they knew anything. They didn't know anything about the airplane or how to run it or anything.
Yeah.
So I get the squadron, and then for the next year and a half, I take it from the 8 airplanes and 10 or 12 guys to 24 airplanes, and probably had 28 guys, pilots, by that time I gave up the squadron.
Wow. What was it like standing that up? I mean, you had not ever stood up a squadron before, not ever built one up before. Was that a lot of learning, building the airplane while you're flying it type stuff?
Very much so. And given the nature of the program, let me give you a little nature of the program. I would go to work, a typical work week is I would go to work on Monday around noon, and I would come home, if I came home and I had the weekend off, I would come home on Friday afternoon late. The Shea and the family had a single phone number if they had emergency or something where they could call and somebody would find me and get in touch with me, and I would call them back.
Okay.
But there was no constant communication.
No email, no texting.
Nope.
Yep.
Nope, none of that.
That's got to be hard.
Well, it's not hard if that's all you know.
Yeah. I guess that's a good point.
You know, because I could call home, but it's interesting in the phone system and how I could call home with it. Where
Wouldn't call back to that number.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can call back to the number.
Yeah.
So, but when we would go to work, because we were only flying at night, we didn't fly in the daytime. So we'd go to work on Monday afternoon. We would fly usually one go. In other words, we launch all of our schedule that night one time. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we'd fly 2 goes. It might be a 8-turn 4 or a 10-turn 6 or something, depending on the number of airplanes we had going. So, which meant that at night, you know, I never usually left the squadron building until the last airplane was down. You know, that's part of being the boss, right? You be around.
Absolutely.
Then you go by the bar and have a beer on the way to your room. Then you try to sleep during the daytime. Got lots of luck. Because at the time we had some people called red hats that like to make afterburner takeoffs right low over us.
I've read about this, yes.
Yes.
Keep you awake.
Yes. Because there was more than 1 or 2 barroom brawls between the red hats and the stink bug drivers. They called us the stink bug drivers.
I've never heard that before. I guess it does sort of look like a stink bug.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah.
They call us a stink bug. We'll just squash you. So by the time you come home on Friday, you know, you've sort of it's like going to Europe on Monday, working on European time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, fly back home. Now you're back on U.S. time for Saturday and Sunday and half of Monday. Your body clock, your circadian rhythm is all hosed up.
Yeah. You're
And
home.
you would do this week after week after week. What made it even tougher was in the summertime when there's so much more daylight. We couldn't open the hangar doors till an hour after sunset.
Really?
Yep. And we had to have the airplanes back in the hangar an hour before sunrise.
That's smart. Yeah.
So that no cameras could take pictures of what's going on.
Absolutely.
So when you go home for the weekend, the family wants to be up and running and doing things on Saturday and Sunday, and you're going, I need to sleep. So your body just was tossed. It's like going back and forth to Europe every week. And in the summer of that first year is when we killed the first guy. He was my squadron guy. He was an F-15 guy. And we were in the height of the summer long days, short nights, hard time sleeping, and you're not even taking the first takeoff till 11 o'clock at night or 10:30 at night. It was on the second go of the night on Thursday, which was the last flying night of the week. I had gone to Vegas because the next day I was to take an A7, go cross country for the weekend and meet up with the family in Missouri somewhere. And the second go of the night, he hit the ground, somewhere over in the Edwards area. He hit the ground basically straight in, right at supersonic.
Gosh.
Dug a crater hole in the desert floor that was way deep, and so much of the airplane was just totally disintegrated. What we figured out was he was tired, so he had a physiological problem. That he was tired. It's the last night of the week, second go of the last night. And unbeknownst to me, he and another F-15 guy had been working on SAM evasive tactics. Been doing this by themselves. Yeah.
And that maneuver is potentially what?
Well, he went spatial D.
During this? Okay.
During that maneuver.
Yeah.
Where he was, there were virtually no lights on the ground. So the ground and the stars looked pretty much the same.
Oh, yeah.
He's an F-15 driver. Different mindset, than an air-to-mud driver was. And he was doing this high-G barrel roll, which we had said all along, do not do that because you're destroying your RCS capability. Okay, so you got to trust the electromagnetic stuff here.
Yeah.
Of course, we were all skeptical to start with, but no, we're not doing the high-G barrel roll stuff. Even in Desert Storm, the guys didn't do that when SAMs were being shot. Okay?
Yeah.
They said, I'm trusting in the magic.
And it worked.
Because if you maneuver that airplane, you are now offering a brighter radar return to whatever radar you think you're trying to defeat for a SAM or whatever. But we're convinced that he went spatial D because part of the reason because he was tired and he was trying an unauthorized maneuver. And,
wow, yeah.
And the worst thing for me is I got the call, 2 o'clock in the morning. You better get over to Ross's house and take your wife because Ross, we don't know where Ross is, but we think he's dead.
So you did the notification?
Yep.
Oof.
Yeah, and that's not the first one my wife and I have done over the years.
Really?
Yeah. Had to do one in an A7 too.
Are you ever ready for that? I cannot imagine what it's like when you knock on that door.
You're never ready for it, but you understand it. And the first time you're trying to be so helpful, the family is not in that receptive mode. They can't be at that point because they're in shock, and they will be in shock for hours. Like our A7 neighbor friend he went in down on the Eglin Range in an A7 spatial disorientation at night on that overwater to land range down there. And so we didn't find out that he had gone in with the airplane until, 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning when they found the wreckage. So we're sitting with her and her kids for hours.
And there's no new information.
No new information.
Yeah, you don't know.
And they are just, surely, don't you think he would have ejected? He would have ejected if he knew he was in trouble.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
So back to your question again, it's never easy. But if you have experienced it in a squadron, and that's where, because somebody else in the squadron had gotten killed, okay, then you understand the need for it and the need to just be there. And they will be lashing out at why didn't this or why you just gotta try to maintain your calm and cool so that it reflects to them. Because if you're running around crazy, they're going to get even worse.
Absolutely, that's not helping anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to keep a list. I got it still somewhere at home. Now this is macabre. I stopped keeping track of a list shortly after I got in the F-16 world. This is my friends who died in fighter accidents.
Okay.
The list was 28 or 30 people long.
Gosh.
Yeah.
The mishap investigation side of that, I assume, I mean, this is the first loss of this jet. So not only is this a terrible tragedy for that family and the Air Force, there's a security side of it. I imagine you guys probably had a team ready to go. The reason I mention this is I had a friend that was peripherally involved in a mishap, and he was a little bit surprised at how unprepared some people were. And so after that, in my squadron, we have a every Friday sit down, all pilots type thing. And I was like, hey guys, have we opened up the mishap binder? And we flipped through it. It's last updated 6, 12, 18 months ago. The names are wrong. The numbers are wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, guys, this is not going to cut it. If something happens, we need to be ready. I don't want it to happen. But when it does, it's the worst day of everyone's life. Right. You have to be ready. Were you guys, I'm not trying to ask anything, but y'all were ready. Y'all had a plan.
Yeah. And the Air Force, in our business, you always have a plan. Now, does it have the latest phone numbers in it?
Yeah.
But the plan has the steps of things to do.
Of course.
And that's the important thing to do is just like right here when I was chairman of this airport authority, we didn't have a crash book. What do you do if something crashes, somebody crashes on the runway? What do you do? Well, call 911.
It's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Call the FAA, get the airplane.
So the question you and I could ask, and we could go out here this afternoon to the boys behind the desk, is, where's the crash book?
Yeah.
But without something to go by, then you start John Wayne it, and you miss things or you do things wrong that actually create more problems than they solve.
It's a time of high emotion, and
and you can't trust clear head thinking in those times.
Nope. Even the best, smartest people make them.
That's why we have emergency checklists in airplanes, right?
Absolutely. So you guys obviously came back from that. The airplane, you all continued flying. The investigation went through.
We came back from that. The ironic thing about that particular accident is I had been watching this going on for some time, and I had gotten really concerned. And before I went to Las Vegas that evening, my DO was out or he was gone somewhere or flying. So I left a letter on his desk that said, sir, if we don't change things while we're doing business right now, we're going to kill somebody.
Really?
Yes.
And when you say change things, are you talking about
how we worked our duty cycle?
Okay. People being very tired.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, nice you give it to the DO the night that we have a crash about 4 hours later, but it had been bugging me for so long, and I couldn't get anybody to pay attention to me talking. So I'd written it down as a squadron commander to the DO, sir, we got a problem.
Yeah. And I assume it got attention after that.
It did.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the aftermath of the accident, and I can't remember, was it Aviation Week or sometime later, it came out that I had expressed my concerns to the leadership about how we were running our duty cycle and the risks that we were imposing on our pilots by this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because fatigue is a cumulative buildup. It's not a one-time shot that you can cure tomorrow. It's over time. If you build up that fatigue over a matter of weeks, it'll take you a week to get rid of that fatigue. That's just the physiological. And we did get some human factors involvement from the Air Force, and because that applied to all squadrons, not just ours. So the Air Force did make some tweaks to crew duty day and et cetera following that.
Okay. How long had you been CO at that time?
At that time, probably 4 months.
Wow, that's fair. And it's a 2-year, 3-year orders?
Was it that first year or was it second year? Let's see. Yeah, it was the first summer.
And the reason I ask is, you mentioned that this was an unauthorized maneuver.
Yeah.
So it was clearly known, hey, don't do this. And you had 2 folks that were out doing what was not permitted.
Yes.
This might be a very broad question, but how do you as the boss, when you've said, don't do this, someone goes and does it, and unfortunately a mishap occurs, how do you rein folks back in? How do you handle that? I understand there's a lot of culture in the well, we say the wardroom. I don't know what y'all would call it, but with amongst fellow aviators, when the boss says something, it happens. It's not up for negotiation. You're the commanding officer, but yet someone still violated that knowingly. How do you bring people back from that, especially in such a high visibility airplane very early in your tenure? They're like, that's got to be such a challenge.
Well, one of the first things you do, and it could be an accident, it could be a lot of things, is you gather all the folks together. Okay? As soon as you have the facts, gather them together, sit them down in a room, and you're straightforward with them. Here's what happened. Here's why it happened. Here's what, none of this will ever happen again. And if you don't like following these rooms, there's the door. I'll help you find another assignment. That's the way you have to deal with the people that work for you, because they have to see that, okay, we knew these two guys. How many of you knew they were doing this behind our back? And neither me nor the ops officer or the flight commander knew about it.
But afterwards, everyone, we heard
we knew.
about it. Yeah. So then why didn't you stop it?
Yeah.
It's easy to say that in retrospect.
Right. But. And you see a lot of that post-accident on a lot of kinds of accidents. Why didn't somebody say something? Okay. Why didn't somebody say something to them to get them to stop the peer, from the peer pressure? Because we've been doing a lot of work on radar cross-section and a lot of testing with the airplane. And we were finding out a lot of things about the airplane against the Soviet equipment that we knew would work. So it made no sense to try to think to do a barrel roll, high-G barrel roll at night to defeat a SAM missile that you're not even sure is coming at you.
Yeah.
And the visibility was so bad out of the cockpit, unless it was coming from the front quarter, you'd never see it anyway.
Exactly. So how are you going to visually defeat it if you can't even see the thing?
Right.
Well, you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to circle back to it, A-10 folks, F-15 folks. I'm going to call you an F-16 guy at that point, but F-105, F-16. Folks from so many different communities, and not just air-to-air and air-to-ground, but now both are all in this air-to-ground platform. Did folks kind of drop what they'd learned before and realize, hey, this is a new airplane, we have to employ it a new way? Or is there sometimes pushback where, hey, well, that's the way we did it in the F-16, that's the way I did it in the F-15, or the A-10, or vice versa? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I would say there was two schools of thought on that.
Okay.
The guys that had spent most of their career in the air-to-ground work, okay, whether, we had 111 guys as well, and they were much more attunable to, okay, this is a new way of doing a ground attack tactic. The F-15 guys, not so much. And especially this F-15 guys, he'd only flown an F-15. He had no air-to-mud experience. We had two guys. One was killed in an A-7 on a gunnery range before he ever got checked out in the airplane. But two F-15 guys are the first. And the second fatality, which occurred a year later after I'd left, was another F-15 only guy. Spatial disorientation on the range at night, hit the ground straight in.
Jeez.
So there was a respect for the air-to-ground dynamics amongst the air-to-ground guys that the F-15 guys never had experienced. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
So the three fatalities we had in the organization while it was at Tonopah were all F-15 guys.
Okay. Did you have any kind of sway with personnel? I don't understand the interactions between a CO. For us, it'd be Buper's Bureau of Personnel out in Millington, but could you say, hey, these are the kind of people that we want to build our community? It's an air-to-ground airplane, so we want air-to-ground people. Or was it just they were shotgunning folks from different communities to try to meld everything together?
Well, the initial part of it was sort of a shotgun. It was I know somebody. Let's go talk to him and see. Okay. After the second accident, I'd been gone by then. They got a lot smarter and said, we want pilots. You can be an F-15 guy, but we want you to have air-to-ground experience, whether that's an F-15E or F-111 or whatever, F-4, because we discovered that the guy with nothing but air-to-air background was not good at single-ship night ground attack. And
why could they be? They've never done it before.
Right.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. That first flight in the F-117, I remember you talked about your first reaction to seeing it on video. What was it like flying it for the first time? Was it what you expected? Did the simulator prepare you for it?
There's no simulator.
There was no simulator. Why did I thought there was. Okay.
You know the simulator where it was?
I don't. At the factory, maybe?
Well, yeah, it was at the Rye Canyon annex of Lockheed down in Burbank.
Okay.
And it consisted of a laptop screen, an office chair, and a mouse.
Okay.
That was the simulator. Now, we did get a simulator.
I think later in the program.
We did.
Yeah.
And it came in right about the time I gave up the squadron.
Okay. And my only data points on the airplane are a book that I read, and this guy was at the tail end of the F-117 program. So I'm assuming things that I guess were not there at the beginning, which makes perfect sense.
Right.
So, okay, so that first flight was, no simulator. So,
well, when I first got in A7, we had no simulator either.
correct. So I guess for you, it
And
wasn't
none
a
in
big
the
deal.
F-16.
In the
So how are we doing?
Ops normal. Yeah, you're doing great. Okay. So at least what I read in his book, the way he described it, kind of the syllabus was you'd be in a T-38 occasionally, maybe chase one if you could sandbag a ride. But your first, you take the airplane out, taxi it up, bring it back into the little barn there. Next time you take it out to the runway, maybe go down the runway. Then you'd actually do your first flight after that. You're chased by another aircraft. It was a very, very crawl, walk, run approach.
That was the way it was
at the
at
end.
Holloman. Yes.
At Holloman, okay.
Yes, when it was Holloman. In the black days, we had A7s as our chase.
Okay.
We had 2-seat A7s.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so we'd gotten a couple of them from the Guard. But the instructors would all fly everything was a single-seat chase. If there was a 2-seater, they would strap the back seat down.
Okay.
Because we had two-seat models, and the rest were single-seat A7s. So the way it worked back then, was you do the academics, get the academics done, and then whenever you weren't in academics, you would go sit in the cockpit to get to where you knew every switch in that cockpit blindfolded. Then an instructor would, one of the guys would come sit on the ladder next to you, and you would go through all of the checklist. How do you start it? This, that, And then you would close your eyes and you'd go through all the emergency procedures. If, what's ill port, where, all of those you would actually put your finger out where that particular switch would be, or in the case of the drag chute, where the drag chute handle was. So once you got that done and the IP was comfortable with you, the next thing you did was a high-speed taxi test.
All at night?
No, yeah.
Okay.
So he would be on, you'd go start the right engine.
Okay.
On the other side of the
ladder's
airplane.
on the left side, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So he can be up there with you.
So he goes through getting you started on the right engine, and he goes, then he'd get down, pull the ladder away, and you'd start the left engine.
Wow.
And then for the high-speed taxi test, they'd follow you in a automobile.
Okay.
And the goal was to get out, do your pre-takeoff checks, accelerate out to about 80 or 90 knots, pull it to idle, pull the drag chute, stop, taxi back, and you're done for the day.
And I understand there's a little bit of drama with the drag chute, right? It's got to go out between the twin tails. There's a little bit of like a crosswind limit or something. Basically, you could foul it and potentially rip one of the tails off. Am I getting that right?
You could, but we never did.
Okay. You just had to respect the limits and.
Yes.
Okay.
So once you got that and you proved me, it was easy because 105, we had drag chute we used all the time.
Ah, okay.
But F-15 guys or 111 guys, none of them had ever seen drag chute. F-100 guys had. F-100 had a drag chute.
Okay.
So then the next time you did that, it was go take off and go fly.
Okay.
And it was a big nothing burger for me because it's the F-16 flight control system.
That's right.
With a center stick rather than a side controller.
Side stick. Okay.
And not near as much thrust as F-16 has.
Not near as much visibility. Yeah. Is it a bigger cockpit, smaller cockpit? Did it feel natural?
It's wider down below the canopy rails. Up here, it gets to be like a triangle up here.
Ah, okay.
And it's very difficult to move your head around without hitting canopy glass.
Okay.
I did a test once to try to see if we could use NVGs, night vision goggles.
Yeah.
No way.
Whacking them on stuff.
Well, yeah, you couldn't turn. If you turn around, the goggle is going to hit the side panel.
Yeah.
And the only reason we were looking at that was, is there a threat where we need to go in at lower altitude where we would need NVGs?
Oh my, yeah.
And after I said no, because I'd gone to fly with a 141 crew using NVGs on a night low level.
Okay.
And I said, not in this airplane.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it.
Okay.
So we killed that.
Okay.
And that was good because we would have killed guys at low altitude at night with that first generation NVG.
A lot of stuff I've read online, there's a lot of, well, it's 1,000%. The term SME, subject matter expert, I jokingly call these folks subject matter enthusiasts. They read stuff and then think they know it.
Yeah.
Was there ever any thought to employ the airplane as an air-to-air asset, or it was a air-to-ground asset?
Air-to-ground all the way.
That's it. That's what I've thought and that's what it was designed for. But there's so many people, you could put AIM-9s and AIM-120s and all this crap. It's like, that's not what the airplane was made for. So,
Nope.
All right, cool. There you go. Nope. Perfect. Speculation complete. Had a tailhook. A lot of people didn't know that. I didn't realize it.
Correct.
But it's not like you just drop it and cycle it for no reason, right?
No.
Yeah, it's a one-time use.
It's hidden. There's a panel back there, and I believe it's either lightweight fiberglass. No, I think it was plywood.
Really? Okay.
But it was coated with a radar absorbent material.
Okay.
And then if you lowered the hook, it smashed the plywood, and it was just like the 105, only designed for keep your run off the other end of the runway.
Gotcha. So you got a drag chute, you got a tail hook, but it's the one use departure end cable.
And then you got to go. Not only do you have to put the hook back up, now you got to fix the bottom of the airplane because you busted the radar cross section.
I did read something in the book about like the $80,000 switch or something like that. When you blew it, you were spending money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was not the preferred method to stop the airplane. How did it fly? Was it an airplane that was I love the phrase, a pilot's airplane? Was it intuitive? How did it compare to, I guess, what you've flown, the A7, the F-16?
It was an airplane.
It was an airplane? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking with the Delta, would it float a lot in the flare? Did it have...
Not really.
Really? Okay.
One of the requirements at the time was we had to go to Luke, where the F-15 train house was, and get 2 front seat sorties in an F-15, which were just a ball for me.
Okay.
Because you sit so high up off the ground, and the flare position looks very similar. So the Air Force says, well, we need everybody to go get F-15 landings. So, first time you fly, it's not a total. I had a great time doing that because my instructor pilot, who I later hired to come to the 117, I put the airplane in something he'd never seen before. A vertical, out of airspeed, what happens next? I don't know, I've never done that. Oh!
So you just took the airplane up vertically and just ran it out of energy?
Yep.
How does it depart? Did it go over the top? Did it go nose down?
Just sort of, yeah.
Yeah. And it's same idle neutral or just let go of the controls?
Just let go.
Okay.
When the nose comes down, you let go of the controls. If you don't have any yaw associated with it, it's not going to do anything except accelerate.
Yeah. So you have to have a little bit of fun while doing that.
Yeah, but I'd never seen that before. I've been flying this airplane for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Huge bomb bay. Is it essentially two bombs, one on either side?
Right.
I'm trying to remember, and I apologize, I'm digging, but you actually did it. I'm just reading. I've just read about this stuff, but it was designed for precision-guided weapons, so laser-guided weapons.
Right.
However, there was a capability to use dumb bombs, right? Basically, the computers, no, really? Okay. And again, this is what I've read or what I remember.
You had no idea where it would hit if you dropped it level at 15,000 feet or 10,000 feet. You had no idea where the bomb was going to go.
Okay. There's just too many factors that...
And the system wasn't set up to do that.
Ah, okay.
The system was set up to have its own self-targeting capability with its own laser.
Correct.
So, if you weren't dropping a laser-guided bomb, you had no idea where it hit.
Hmm.
Now, for practice bombs, we use the old BDU-33.
Blue Death?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd run along, go to the range, and you run the whole system, the bomb would fall out, but you had no idea where it was. It'll hit somewhere down there close in the vicinity of the target. But
yeah, not the desired mission end state of that. Okay.
No. What I was most proud of was not that time, but in the second time I was in it was, I guess it was the first time. I went to Texas Instruments and got them to start working on a laser-guided, inertially directed JDAM attack weapon. At the time, we didn't have the capability in the airplane, nor did TI with the guidance kit. When I went back to the airplane a few years later, they had GPSs in the airplane, GPS navs, and they put the interface in there to be able to talk to, so you could actually drop on GPS coordinates even if you couldn't laze the target. Now, lasing the target was the most accurate, assuming you've got the right target.
Sure. But if you had a fixed target and on a set of coordinates, you could drop through the weapon.
You could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to be able to laser spot to.
No, but your CEP, your circular error probable, is bigger with just the GPS guidance.
Okay.
But the fact that we had GPS guidance kits on the bombs helped tremendously. So now the circular error problem goes down to, let's call it this size, and then if you can do laser guided, it goes to there.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's what you want. You want to be able to be incredibly accurate with that.
Because we didn't want what drove the requirement was we're in a war with somebody, and we're launching tonight. And we got critical targets to go after, and the target is covered in clouds. We'd like the ability to at least do a GPS precision on it.
Yep.
So that's what drove that dual function kit.
You mentioned Texas Instruments. Obviously, the jet was built by Lockheed, and there's multiple contractors involved. Did you find you guys had a good relationship when you needed something? These were brand new airplanes. There was a lot to be learned. Were they receptive to, hey, the user needs this, let's change it? Or was it a little bit of that standard Air Force back and forth?
See that right there?
I do, yeah.
I got to be very, very close friends with Ben Rich.
I read his book.
Who was the head of
Absolutely.
the Skunk Works. And then his replacement, when I went back to it the second time, Ben had retired.
Okay.
And I'll think of it in a second, had taken over. So the old building, the old Skunk Works in Burbank, I'd been down there a number of times. Then when they moved up to Palmdale in their new facility, and I was back in the airplane again, I went there a number of times. They were always receptive to every... And I guess it was because I had built the respect from them in those early days at Tonopah. You know, when the risk of having the airplane get a black eye and you know, I'd help keep it. Yes, no, that was an operator error airplane.
Yeah.
So I had a very good relationship. Paul Martin was the other one that took Ben's place.
Okay. And Ben Rich replaced Kelly Johnson.
Right.
Yeah.
I've got Ben Rich's book autographed. And I was the only Air Force officer to go to his funeral.
Really?
Yeah. I was really, really mad at our Air Force when that happened. I was at Holloman at the time when he died.
Okay. And why? We don't have to get into it.
I don't know.
Okay.
I do not know. But I showed up there in my uniform. Lydia's his wife, and we had met once or twice, and it was just, there was a lot of people there, but not one other Air Force officer was there.
Wow. Especially for someone that made such a contribution.
I know. That
That's very
sticks in my craw to this day.
Of course, I can imagine so. That's good that you guys had that relationship, though, because I imagine I've heard too many stories, even just recently, something general aviation, where, oh, well, I don't know, it left the factory. It's not my problem anymore. Okay, man, yeah, but you built it. Why don't you want to help the end user?
Well, I look at it this way. I had some experience doing this, remember, in the F-16?
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, when you go sit across the table from the head of General Dynamics and tell him, if you want to sell some more airplanes, the major says you need to do this. You know, and here's my data to prove it.
Absolutely. You're not just blowing smoke.
So what that boils down to is it's personal relationships. If you don't have the personal relationships with the people that can make the decisions, don't expect the decisions to be made.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it on a PowerPoint or a video chat. It's a one-to-one, like we're sitting today, across the table from each other.
Yeah. It's trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they might not have, I mean, I suppose like any airplane in its infancy, there's issues, and it's up to the people how they handle them. If they work together, great. If not, that program can fail. It could, I'm sure there's plenty of programs that have failed because of interpersonal stuff.
Yep.
So, wow. That's very interesting. So first flight in the airplane, any distinct memories, anything come back to you? Just another sled ride?
Sticks in the middle and it's underpowered.
Underpowered, yep.
It's like an A7 with an F-16 flight control.
Okay. So the A7 was a good companion for it? To keep people current?
Yes.
2 engines instead of 1. I know it's not exactly the same, but...
Yeah, and we would practice bomb dropping at night from the A7, straight and level.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So that's why we called it the companion trainer. Now, there's a story I'll have to tell you about when I was a squadron commander. One of our theaters of operation was European theater, and we had a base that we would that we were to stage out of, and that was Bentwaters Air Base.
In England.
Right.
Yeah.
So I cooked up the idea and sold it to my bosses that we need to do a practice deployment to Bentwaters to check out everything. We won't take the airplane.
In the A7.
We'll take the A7.
Yeah.
And we'll go over there under the guise of we're going to do some advanced avionics testing.
Okay.
So we had some very ingenious crew chiefs and others that took some old napalm cans.
I've read about this, yes.
That we used as baggage pods, right? To carry.
Okay, yep.
Well, they had a couple of these they'd made up with lights and flashing lights of different colors on the front and the back and whatever, and they would flash at different times. So if we go over there and make the Brits think when we go to take off at night, and these pods start lighting up, we're really doing some kind of avionics testing. So we go over there and work for about a week or 10 days, I don't remember what it was, working out of the shelters at Bentwaters, and because that's where our bomb storage area was for Europe, was in Bentwaters at the time. So we were trying to get the feel for how we would operate in Europe had we go there. Of course, it helped that I'd been over there for a couple of years prior to that. So the Brits, they were always out there, and they would get the cameras, taking pictures, and what is that thing? And because we'd go out to the end of the runway, and they'd have a big tarp hanging over it. So we wouldn't pull the tarp out.
You hammed it up good, yeah.
Until it was time to go take off. Yeah, and they kept trying to figure out, what is that? Is that a jamming pod they're doing? What
That's
is that?
fantastic. And this was at nighttime or in the daytime?
Daytime.
Daytime, okay, so.
Yeah, because they take their pictures.
Oh, yeah,
Brits
yeah.
do it. They didn't have any night cameras at the time.
Sure.
So we wanted to make sure that they saw
it.
that.
Yeah. And that made it back to other folks, our adversaries.
Yeah.
What the heck is an A7 with that pod on the bottom doing?
And then
That's
I
awesome.
did another one, again, before I left, where let's see if we can covertly deploy the airplane. So I had a guy that was working with us. He had done a fair amount of stuff. He was an Air Force guy with the CIA in his past. So he and I got to talking, and he was in the airlift crowd. So I cooked up a plan, sold it to my bosses, that we're going to take a 4-ship of A7s. We're going to sneak out of Tonopah. We're going to go down to Key West, Florida, or actually it's Homestead Air Force.
Homestead, yep.
And we're going to operate for 2 nights down there and come back. Nobody will ever know we were gone or we were there. They went, how in the world? So I explained the plan, and we did it.
Okay.
Took 4 airplanes. ATC, nobody knew. I can't tell you how we did that.
I was going to say, I would love to know in a different format, but
And we
holy
went
moly.
down there, and we operated only at night.
Okay.
And we flew missions out of there for 2 nights. Then on the 3rd night, we redeployed back home.
Wow.
Nobody knew
You were gone.
that we were gone or that we were there. We briefed in a couple of people at the base,
Okay.
the wing commander,
Okay.
and we briefed in the chief of air traffic control.
So if his folks saw something, they would be.
And then anytime we were flying, we had one of our guys in the tower with theirs.
As a soft, basically, or maybe not, I'm not using the right term, but yeah, a rep, squadron.
So once we proved that we could do that, that became part of the potential war plan.
Of course.
And that's what they used when they went to Panama, by the way.
Ah, okay. Were you gone? You were gone by the time.
I was gone by
Okay.
then, yeah.
Gotcha. But that was the first operational employment, I'm guessing, of the
Yes.
jet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, why did we do it in Panama? I mean,
I've often wondered about that. Yeah. I'm guessing that was probably made at a very high level, that decision.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I'm sure there's all sorts of reasons why. But wow. That's really cool though. I mean, the B2 has the T-38, the U-2 has the T-38, but companion trainers, at least that I'm aware of, are not really used as commonly as they were for y'all. It seems like a really good use of the airplane and a good way to get hours for guys, because you got to be flying something even if it's not your operational asset.
And that's one of the things that we used as well as a cover story.
And a good one.
Advanced testing. Because, when I'd go up range on Monday, I would either go up on a King Air or I would go up in an A7. Just depends on timing and schedule and whatnot. Sure. And same way of coming back. I may come back in an A7 or I may come back on a King Air.
Did you get a lot of visitors? Was it it was high visibility to a certain crowd, I'm guessing, but were there a lot of people that wanted to come out and see the jet?
Well, not many people knew about it.
Okay, fair enough. I'm guessing Air Force dignitaries and that type of thing, but a very small subset.
Very small subset of Air Force dignitaries were even read into the program.
Okay. And then over time, I'm guessing just things opened up.
Once they went public with it, that was about 89. I think it was fall of 89 when we announced it.
Okay.
Then everybody wanted to go see it.
Sure.
There's a great story that happened before I got there. President Reagan was in L.A. for some kind of a whatever. They whisked him out of the hotel about midnight, put him on an airplane, flew him up, gave him a tour, let him meet people, had him back in the hotel before sunrise.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, he's the boss. He gets to see the jet, I guess.
Yep.
Wow. I know you came back to fly the jet, so I know we might be mixing time frames. So you didn't just have the one tour flying.
Right.
Was it a two-year set orders the first time?
Well, it was supposed to be 2, but
okay.
I didn't make 2.
Oh, okay.
I got promoted out of it.
And what were you promoted to?
Colonel.
06. So it was an 05 level command. 06. They send you. Where did they send you after that?
National War College.
Okay.
Washington.
About a year.
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Then to the Pentagon for a year.
No one can see that I can. It's not recorded via audio, but the look on your face is telling me all I need to know.
It sucked.
Yeah.
It really sucked.
I've not heard anyone that's gone there and said, "Yeah, it was a great tour. I can't wait to go."
Some
back."
people like it. They thrive in that environment. I
Really?
hated it.
Okay. I'm some junior officer and I don't have a choice. I'm stuck. I'm going to the Pentagon. What do you do to, I don't want to say survive. That's the wrong way to say it. What do you avoid? What's the bad habits that people pick up without even realizing it? I know that's kind of a broad question, but if you were trying to give advice to someone that doesn't have a choice, they're going there, is there anything? Enjoy your time. Try to get out of there as quick as you can.
Well, it's hard to say enjoy your time. The family may enjoy their time depending on where you live.
Of course.
But the commute into the Pentagon and back every day is awful. And that was awful back then. That's worse now. The satisfaction of a job in the Pentagon, most jobs you don't get much satisfaction out of.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Yeah. So you're just doing your time, basically. What was your job specifically when you were there?
I was chief of the fighter programming world for the Air Force.
Okay.
And if you know what programming means,
I don't.
That's basically planning force structure.
Okay.
Okay.
How many wings? How many squadrons?
Et cetera.
Yeah.
And then fighting for that budget authority all the way through. Now, here's the thing that's frustrating. So the PPBS, Planning, Programming, Budgeting system, typically works on a 1-year physical plan, that takes effect 1 October, if Congress is working correctly.
Sure.
So come about November, December, you start working on the plan for next year that'll go from the president to the Congress about 1 October, start of the next fiscal year, or in time for the Congress to vote on it. So you spend all this time and effort, you build a plan, and for me, I had 25% of the Air Force budget. Yeah.
Not insignificant. That's a lot.
Yeah. So you build this plan, and you put together, based on the guidance the bosses give you, and you start taking it through the approval process. Every step in the approval process, it's the axe and the meat cleaver come out. No, we gotta cut that because I need this.
Yeah.
Routine. So you finally get it through the Air Force. Then it goes through the Secretary of Defense. They whittle away and implement. So now you spent many hours doing and redoing the plan, and you get something. Well, it's not what I would have submitted, but I think we can live with it. Then it goes over to Congress. All bets are off. They take it and wholesale tear it up, throw it away, add stuff, take away. It's just so it's the most frustrating experience that you could ever ask for as a senior officer, to go to the Pentagon your first tour and see that process and how bad it is.
How do you think we could fix it? I know that's a very simple question to a very challenging, or a simple way to ask a very challenging question.
Well, they tried to fix it some decades back by doing a 2-year budgeting cycle.
Okay.
So you would go through this, and the budget would get approved every 2 years. Congress didn't like that. Throw it out.
Okay.
Because Congress wants control the power of the purse.
Yep.
And every congressman that's got something in the military related in his district or his state has got his finger in the pie.
Yeah. Man, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
How long was it? Was it a year?
That was a year. And I convinced my boss to let me out of there.
Okay. Where'd you go next?
I went to Japan to be the 5th Air Force Director of Operations.
Okay. Is that a flying tour?
Flying tours.
Would you fly there?
F-16.
So back in the Viper.
Back in the Viper.
Back in your favorite airplane.
So now I'm in my third checkout in the F-16.
That's the executive checkout, though. You've got a couple hours. So
well,
it's just,
but it's still 5 rides.
Yeah. Okay. Was it a lot of flying, or was it most? That's not your job to fly. Your job is to manage at that point, right?
Well, my job was to manage, and a lot of it was working collateral relationships with my Japanese counterparts. I had to do my flying. I had to go up to Misawa in the northern part of Japan to fly.
Ah, okay.
So that was always got to get up there, got to fly. Or if one of the squadrons was going to go down to the Philippines, I'd try to get down there and go fly with them.
Okay.
Right. So the good news was that job only lasted a year.
Because of where you went next.
Because of where I went next.
Yes. What was Korea like?
Probably the most fun tour of anything I've done in the Air Force. Now,
wow,
the families are not there, so everybody there is batching it, bachelor.
Geo-bachelor, yeah.
Geo-bachelor.
Yep.
But it was at the time, and it probably still is the crucible. I call it the Air Force's crucible for making a war fighter. Whether you're an airplane driver, whether you're a maintenance technician, whether you're a logistics guy, whatever, at least the way we ran the Coon when I was there was we were always ready for the North Koreans, okay? And the North Koreans could come at us from the sea, because we were right on the Yellow Sea, or other ways. So there was this constant, we got to be on the tip of the spear, boys, and we are going to exercise for real. So none of this make-believe stuff, okay? And with a 1-year tour, you get about 12-15% of your force turns over every month.
Wow. That's a lot.
And we were taking, you take maintenance people from all over the Air Force, or logisticians or medical people or whatever, and you put them over there, they are totally at a loss for the first few weeks they're there. And then when you throw an alarm black or an alarm red on them and a gas mask and all this other stuff, they go, what do I do? And then to teach them how to defend their own building with a weapon, it's quite a learning experience. But it's one heck of a challenge. And to do it right.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
And you were the wing commander?
Yes.
8th, is it? I want to make sure I get it 100% correct here. The the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. So not just F-16s. There, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an A-10 squadron
Nope.
there? No?
That's
okay.
at Suwon.
Suwon. Okay.
Okay. That's up north of us.
Okay.
We only had F-16s, and we had a contingent of ROKAF, or Republic of Korea Air Force.
Okay. What did they fly?
F-5s at the time.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
Had one little squadron there.
Okay. How was it working with them?
Easier than working with the Japanese.
Interesting.
You know, this may not go over very well, but
I can cut it out. It's fine.
you hit a raw nerve with the Japanese when you heard this. We call that the 32T suck. That means I don't know how I'm going to deal with that one.
Gotcha. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Totally fair. Yeah. Only a year. I guess it's good because the family isn't there, but it's a very busy year.
Very busy. Can be stressful. I was actually there about 13 months because my boss had forgotten to ask for a replacement for me. And
left you an extra
He called me and he told me, I said, well, you better call Deshay and tell her that I'm not coming home.
I'm not calling her. You call her.
You call her.
Oh, that's great. Was the flying good? I know the weather is not the greatest at times there, but
It was very good. It was fun.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was good flying.
Okay.
Lost 2 airplanes while I was there.
Oh my.
Both of them due to engine failures.
Pratt or GE engine? Do you happen to remember?
They were GE, but the first one was a fuel-controlled shutoff valve that closed on it all by itself.
Gosh. Okay.
Electrical control.
Okay.
And then the second one was an engine turbine failure. Now, I had the GEs there, not the Pratts.
Correct.
And I much preferred the GE engine, by the way.
I've always been told the big mouth F-16 with the GE engine is where every F-16 pilot wants to be.
Yep, that's what the Block 30s were, and that's what we had at Kunsan.
Okay.
The 32 was the Pratt engine.
Okay. And the forces, and I actually don't know, I believe still split, right? It's not all just GE or Pratt. There's a mixture of both.
I don't know that. Oh,
out there currently now.
Currently in the F-16
yeah.
fleet, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. As opposed to the F-22 or F-35, where it was only the one manufacturer.
Right.
Totally different discussion for another time. Anything more on Korea before we move away from that? Any other thoughts or good stories? It's all interesting to me.
One little quick war story that's fun. We had a big exercise, combined exercise with the Koreans. And it was called, I think it was called Foal Eagle, F-O-A-L Eagle or something like that. There were extra forces that came from the U.S. to participate. And the Koreans and the Special Forces, they were actually going to try to infiltrate and attack our base. And so when we were doing the planning for it, I had the heads of the Koreans and the American Special Forces, et cetera. I said, okay, give me everything you got. Don't hold back. Because by then, we had been training enough that everybody knew their defensive fighting positions. And, of course, we issued M16s, when the alert goes here. But we had the little red thing on the end so that it can't be fired, right?
Sure.
And so I had crew chiefs guarding their shelters. I had my sky cops and all of their defensive positions around the base, et cetera. And they said, well, we're going to get you.
Personally.
I said, if you can find me. Went through the whole exercise. They never found me.
Oh, nice.
And yet they walked right past me a couple of times.
Really?
Yeah, because I look like a one-stripe airman.
Yeah, they're looking for a bird or a star, and they're not going to. Yeah.
They're looking for somebody who's
looks important.
Yeah, which is what those 4 Russian generals in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Stupid enough to do.
I haven't heard about that.
I got 4 of them.
Oh gosh, yeah. That's what you aim for.
Yeah,
but you blend right in.
I learned if you're in that kind of environment where you can't control the perimeter 100%, you better look like everybody else.
Yep.
Don't drive the staff car. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. Just look like a regular GI walking around.
Wow.
And they walked past me several times and never found me.
Gosh. That worked. That's all that matters, I suppose.
Yep.
After that, you went back to your favorite place in the world for 2 more tours, right, to D.C.?
One more tour of 2 years.
Okay. One more tour of 2 years.
Yeah.
So Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans and Operations. What the heck was that? What was that like?
Well, it was actually in the requirements.
Okay.
So where we were trying to set requirements for future operations, whether we're going into stealth or
Sure.
it was okay. The only thing good about it was I got to get out of the building quite a bit and go. I got my first close-up look at the F-22, hands-on.
Where was that?
That was at Edwards.
Okay. That's just because you were part of the program?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got the first look at the F-35, the two competing on the ramp at Edwards, and so I got to go and get out away from the Pentagon some.
Yeah.
And of course I still had 2 feet in the black world.
Sure.
Once you get in, you can't get out.
Yes, and that's where you went back to next. But since you mentioned it, the F-22, I think, was a lot of lessons learned from the F-117.
No.
Oh,
they'll
okay,
tell
good.
you that, but they didn't.
Okay, good. Pump the brakes on me. Was the F-35 lessons learned from the F-22 and the F-117?
Well, a little better.
A little better. Okay. If we can talk about it, what are things that maybe we missed the boat on?
Well, let me give you an analogy.
Okay.
I get out of the Pentagon. I get promoted, and I get out of the Pentagon.
Okay.
And I go down to General Lowe, who's running Air Combat Command now, because he said, "Come down. I'm having commanders conference, and I want you to be here." He had been the vice chief for a while I was working for the chief, and he and I known each other from the Alex days. Long story there, but
Okay.
I said, "Okay, so come to the office first." All right, so I went to the office. Am I going to get a wing? Yes. What, Seymour or Shaw or what? He says, no. Holloman, you're going back to the stink bug. What? He says, yes, you're going back. The Air Force blew that move so badly from Tonopah to Holloman, you got to go fix it. It's all screwed up.
Really?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Do I have to?
Do I have to? And he says, trust me, Grumpy. Yes, yes, sir. So I went to Holloman, and the Air Force, when they moved from Tonopah, when they were at Tonopah, the Air Force had a reasonably sized contractor support force there to help them maintain the airplane. And the GIs, the airmen we had up there, most of them had been there for a long time. So we had a very, very talented, experienced workforce. Moved the airplanes to Holloman. They gave all the airmen the choice to move to Holloman or do somewhere else. Very few of them went to Holloman. The Air Force cut the contractor support to 2 people. Okay?
What could go wrong?
So they get down to Holloman, and of course, Holloman had just given up their F-15s. So all the crew chief, all the maintainers were coming from working on F-15s. And only 2 tech reps. There's a little bit of difference in maintaining an F-117 versus an F-15. And they had found after the airplane had been down there for some time that the radar cross-section was, because we kept track of every airplane and every spot on an airplane that you could tell.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because that matters when it comes to measuring RCS.
So all these airplanes started showing up in their prior history because we had all the data on them. All of a sudden, they're showing spikes. What the hell's going on here? So I get there, and they're still sorting through it. They don't know they can't figure it out. So, well, let's take this airplane. He had an airplane. I said, let's take this airplane. What is it? What's the spike show? Well, the spike shows it's up in this front quarter above the nose, up next to where the IRADS is, infrared search. Okay, let's take the RAM off. The RAM is the coating.
Correct.
So they take the RAM off, and guess what's underneath the RAM? You know what speed tape is?
I know exactly what speed tape is. Someone threw speed tape on it and painted RAM over the top?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, no wonder it showed up.
You can't fault the Air Force guys because nobody had taught them.
Exactly.
So I went, holy mackerel, let's pick another airplane. Same thing.
Yeah.
And it was from the Air Force guys not being taught how to maintain the airplane, the coatings,
Sure.
and what goes underneath the coatings.
Sure.
So when I saw the extent of that and the task ahead, and that there was no training for our Air Force guys, we called them Martians for some reason. They were always called Martians because they did magic stuff that nobody else knew about.
Okay.
So that was a major problem. That's the airplane was, and the OR rate of the airplane had fallen on its ass, to say nothing of the RCS. You could get an OR airplane, code 1 airplane, it's a code 10 for RCS. You couldn't send it to war.
Yeah.
So finally figured out what was going on. I talked to my friends at Lockheed. Now that by that time, because they're going, we can help you, but Air Force won't let us. So I put together the story of what happened from the move and why it happened. Here's where we are now. Here's what we have to do to get the airplane back to where you guys want it. So I took that through my numbered Air Force commander. And he goes, I don't know much what you're telling me, but good luck. Then I go to General Lowe at Langley. He says, I was afraid you're going to tell me this. He says, I've got a meeting set up for you tomorrow in the Pentagon. You need to go tell the chief.
Of staff of the Air Force.
Yes. So I had taken my maintenance commander with me.
Okay.
So we go up there, and we get up there, and it's a winter ice and snowstorm in Washington. So we're staying over at Bowling. And now I'm hearing all these, roads, people not coming to work, et cetera, et cetera. So I call over to the vice chief's office, and it was General Carnes at the time. I said, General Carnes, what do we want to do? The chief's not here. He said, Chief's not here. This is just me. Bring it on over here. So we go over, and I go through it with him, and he goes, I think I understand. He turns around and picks up the phone. He calls down to the Secretary of Defense office. His name was Dr. Perry.
Okay.
Who was sort of the father of stealth back in the 70s.
I recognize the name, yes.
And he said, Dr. Perry, I got a story on the 117. Can I bring it down to you? Oh, sure. Nobody else was doing much, right?
Yeah. Quiet day.
So we walk down, sit down on the table with Dr. Perry, and I walk him through the whole thing, and he goes, what's it take to fix it? I said, sir, I had it. Here it is.
Yeah.
And he looks at General Carnes. He says, General Carnes, let's make it happen. So that allowed us to turn on Lockheed to do a couple things. Send us some more tech reps. So we got we got more than 2, and build us a Martian training program that we can train these kids how to maintain the coatings. Because there's only one way to do it. If you don't do it that way, the coating, your RCS, is going to suffer. So we finally we got all of that, put it all together, and got the airplane back up on its feet. That was only half the problem.
Okay. What was the other half of the problem?
The other half was pilots. When I took over I could sense something ain't right in the squadrons. There was 2 operational squadrons and a training squadron. Something ain't right. You get that, and so I started poking my nose around and, just quietly and it turns out that a number of guys had come up for major and gotten passed over. Well, I'm flying the stealth and I get passed over for major. So, and that, sort of like a cancer sort of spreads. So once I figured out what was going on, I said, okay, there's only one way to cure this. And I told my boss over at 12th Air Force, here's what I'm going to do. He says, good luck. So I got all the pilots together in one briefing room.
What rank are you at this time?
I'm a 1-star.
1-star general. How long have you been a 1-star at the time?
I put it on when I went to Holloman.
Okay, so relatively new 1-star.
Yeah, and been there, for 2 or 3 months or so.
They knew who you were.
And they'd seen what I was doing with the maintenance side of the house.
Exactly.
So I had one of the squadron commanders. I said, he was standing at the door. I said, I purposely was a little late getting there. So they're all in there. They're all jabbering. And I told Jim, I said, Jim, call the room to attention and then turn around and sit down. So he calls the room to attention. They all stand up, and I leave them standing for about 2 minutes.
Okay.
And so I start in on them about I understand there's some problems with some people out here. They're having with how we're running this wing and what's happening to it. And finally I said, sit down. You get. So then I went on them. I said, this is a professional organization. Here's how professional aviators operate. Okay? If you're wondering why you didn't get promoted in this last cycle, I don't know why, but if I look at your records with you, I can probably tell you why you didn't get promoted. Here's the deal. Any of you that want out of this airplane, you can go out that door right now or come to me tomorrow, and I will get you out of the 117. Those of you who want to stay, and those of you who are willing to work to make yourself better and to make this wing better, strap it on, because we're going to go do it. And I mean, it was like, I can't remember all I said, but I said, that's it. I didn't take any questions.
Did anyone come see you? Did anyone, is it Cougar turn in their wings?
No, but a couple of wives called my wife. He said, he didn't have to be so mean.
That's fantastic. But I guess what I'm trying to say is people rise to the challenge if you set the bar high.
They did.
You wanted to make it very clear.
Did. And we were successful the next year in getting about 3 of the guys that had been passed over promoted the second time around.
Okay.
But they knew what they had to do. They had to work at it. Both I call it filling some squares that they had neglected that.
It's not just all in the cockpit. It's the overall officer. Yeah.
So, but if you're willing to work at it, I will do my best to try to get you on the next list. And we were successful with 3 of them. A couple of them said, no, I'm out. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Fine.
And that's fair. Yeah.
So I had that going on the pilot side and then the maintenance on the airplane side.
Okay.
So how do you put all that together? Well, we started exercising realistically. And when the ORI did finally come, we blew them away. And the next thing I know, General O calls me and says, you're leaving. Where am I going now?
Gosh, that seemed like it went so quickly. It probably felt that way because it was so much hard work.
And we were there, we got there in June of 93. And we were at Nellis in January 95 or February 95.
Gosh. So that was your last flight in the Black Jet?
Yep.
Anything special?
I did convince Dr. Perry to come down and spend a day or 2 with us, and he did as the Secretary of Defense. And of course, everybody's giving me all sorts of guidance about, how do you do it? I said, General, I promised him a flight in a T-38 where he could go watch a 117 in action drop an LGB. And he loved it.
I'll bet he did.
Took him to the bar, introduced him to some fighter pilots, showed him, and they took him around the maintenance complex, let him see what the maintainers had learned how to do correctly. He was absolutely ecstatic for his 2 days he spent with us.
I'll bet. At that point, the airplane was in the white world.
Yes.
And you came back as the 1-star.
Yeah.
What were things that changed? I know you talked a lot about at the beginning of the time, the airplanes were flown only at night. So when you're in the white world, it wasn't as much at night, correct?
Yeah, what we would do typically is we would fly we'd usually fly one afternoon go and one early evening go.
Okay. So that had helped folks with, circadian rhythm.
Big time.
Yep.
Plus, you're living at home with your families. You're not living.
Exactly. You're not commuting all the way up to Tonopah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier on the families doing it that way. And you didn't see near as much tiredness. But I had other things at Holloman, too. I had a Taiwan lead-in fighter training outfit. I had the German F-4 RTU. I had a helicopter squadron, rescue helicopter squadron.
Wow. So it's not just the 117 at this point. You've got a lot of other stuff.
I had the Air Force's stateside bear base set up, where we store all the tents and stuff we pop up around the world.
Okay.
I had all of that at Holloman, the stateside version of it. So I had a lot going on at Holloman besides the 117.
Besides the 117. So it can only take up part of your time.
Yeah.
Any big dignitaries, any folks that came out to see the airplane? Obviously, you mentioned Chief Staff of the
the Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of Defense, I'm sorry.
Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Air Force. Some others out of the Air Force, but you can't get much bigger than Secretary of Defense.
No, not really. That's about it. Other than Reagan, I guess, in the back of a car.
Yeah, but Reagan didn't get to fly alongside when I watch it in the air.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I can't get much better than that. Is that when the T-38s were introduced at that time at Holloman?
When they went to Holloman, they ditched the A-7s
Okay.
and used the T-38.
Was the T-38 a good companion?
Well, it was a companion only in the fact that now here's your IP chasing you.
Okay.
But the average guy in the squadron didn't fly the T-38 because there were enough sorties at that time where they were getting their time in the 117.
Okay.
We'd have 2 or 3 IPs checked out in each squadron to fly the T-38 because they were IPs in the 117.
Okay, that makes sense. You hadn't ever been stationed at Nellis. I was about to say back to Nellis, but from Holloman, that's where you went next. What was the job at Nellis?
Wing commander.
A lot going on. That's the fighter base. That's where people want to go, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, I mean it's a great base from an Air Force perspective. Living in Vegas stinks.
Exactly.
I hated it. That's the third time we'd lived out there.
Exactly. Yep. At least this time you were home during the weekdays.
Right. And then I went back to check out F-16 again. Okay. So
again.
Yeah. And this time I was flying 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh, wow.
So I was flying 3 variants of the F-16, one of which was aggressor. I was doing aggressor work in the Red Flag. That was fun.
Gotta be, yeah.
And then I was doing OT&E work in the F-16.
Okay.
And then I was doing, I call it some wimpy stuff with the fighter weapons school, as a target or whatever,
Yeah.
Because I'd lost the ability to instruct at that level. I couldn't instruct.
Didn't have the time, I'm guessing.
No.
Yeah.
But I did fly with all of those organizations. And one of the things that I realized when I got there was we're still fighting Red Flag against simulators. Surface to air simulators.
Absolutely.
So by the time I left, I had worked a deal where you think that's a simulator. It's not a real simulator. That's a real thing, real radar looking at you.
Okay.
I had Systems Command that owns all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd worked a deal with them, again, through that personal relationship with the Wing Commander Edwards, to be able to buy some time on their equipment in Red Flags.
Which I'm sure is incredibly valuable. They don't just use those threat emulators. Oh, it's not a threat emulator. It's the real thing. They don't use that just against anyone.
That's right. So we picked about 3 or 4 sites around the Nevada test range where they have some of that equipment to be able to program in to use, I call it on the big push days, where you got big gaggles.
Yep.
So the guys, the average Joe fighter pilot never knew that it wasn't a simulator.
Sure.
So you could actually get some feedback on whether the chaff worked or whether the ECM pod worked.
Against the real thing.
Right.
That's awesome.
Other than by Edwards test pilots, which is normally the way we got the stuff, right? But that one was a hard sell as well.
Sure. I can only imagine. I want to jump way back to your first your tour commanding the F-117 squadron. You mentioned there were some other jets on the base. I've got a couple of books about those jets. Is that something we can talk about at all? I know a lot of it's been opened up.
It came public, and it's public that the Red Hats were there, and that the 117 was there. So that's
Correct.
That's public knowledge.
Absolutely. I've always thought their motto, "Be humble, you cool fucker." I don't know if that's something you ever heard or were ever around.
Well, I heard a lot of other things about them, but
at least the way it was written in, I think it's Steve Davies' book, talking about basically, those folks were very good at what they did as fighter pilots. That's why they were, you can actually confirm this or deny it, but that's why they were pulled to fly those MiGs. You want folks that are very good at their craft now flying Soviet bloc aircraft against U.S. aircraft. But a lot of them were great at getting a kill. It's like, great, man, that doesn't matter if you can employ the airplane successfully. You have to be able to teach others. You have to expose them.
Correct.
Yeah. And
that's correct.
The point was, be humble, you cool fucker. It doesn't matter how good you are. It matters that you can humble yourself and teach others with this incredible asset. I don't know if I'm taking the wrong lesson away, but that's the way I like to, try to tell the story.
That is true. Now, were all of their pilots always that way?
Oh, no, of course not. No, there's no chance. Yeah. It's a spectrum.
But from the bigger picture, they were very good at that.
Okay.
They would fly a mission against a big red flag package, for example, in the morning. When the red flag got down and they got into the big debriefing room, there'd be a couple of those Red Hat pilots that were flying adversary air against them that morning down there talking about what went right and what went wrong.
Okay.
So that kind of feedback is just invaluable. You know, otherwise it's who owns the chalk wins the fight on the chalkboard, right? But when they had those guys down there to say, you know, that this guy was up here, and you had the telemetry of the red flag, you know, of the airplanes carrying the pods, then it made a lot more sense to the guys that participate in red flag that, oh, I didn't know I did that kind of thing. So it was very, very valuable.
Have idea? You said that was A7, that you were the 4 A7s that you were flying?
Yeah, there was 4 A7s and 4 types, as we called them at the time.
Okay. That first time you saw that type, I've read a lot about the guys said that the first time someone was exposed to one of those assets, buck fever. Yeah, sure, I'm flying. I'm in America. I'm flying against another airplane. Holy shit, that's a MiG. Was that a real feeling that folks felt? Was that something that you think you felt? I guess I can talk about you instead of other people, but
I think probably a couple of guys that were with me on that test probably thought that way. But you know, having not been out of Vietnam that long prior to that, it was no big deal.
I had a feeling that might be the case because you'd done the real thing.
Yeah.
You'd fought in Vietnam.
So I said, okay, I'm going to see how I perform, how me and my airplane perform against that airplane.
Okay, and that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm sure for aviators that didn't have that experience that you had, that's all they've ever seen.
Well, yeah, the first few minutes of an engagement like that are,
yeah.
It's like the first time that a fighter pilot flies against an aggressor. You know, they would have been flying T-38s or F-5s or whatever early on, and they go, oh, crap. You know, you get the buck fever.
And that's where I was headed back to. You worked into it perfectly. Flying the F-16 as an aggressor guy at Nellis, was that a natural fit for you? Was that something that, obviously you knew the F-16 very well at that point, but using those different tactics to fly it, was it a natural fit, or was it something that, maybe it took a little bit of work to do amongst your other flying as the wing commander?
It took a little bit of schooling from the guys there to, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's your part of it.
Okay.
Because if I'd gone through the aggressor school in recent years, that would have been a no-brainer. Okay, we're doing a XYZ maneuver. I know what I'm supposed to do. So it was a little bit of, okay, all right, I understand the plan, and here's how you want me to be a part of that plan.
Okay. And it was only F-16s at the time?
Yes.
I think I don't know if they, it's changed a little bit, F-16s, F-15s, but basically those were the threat aircraft at Nellis. I know the Navy's had a whole variety, F-5s, Kafirs, other Hornets, and then now a lot of it seems to be civilian. I know ATAC.
Same thing has happened with Air Force.
Okay. It's been contracted out.
Contracted out, yeah. In fact, the two most recent crashes were Mirages.
Okay, so one thing I didn't ask about earlier, and I wanted to make sure I asked about now, I've read a lot of people say the gulf between 05 and 06 is greater than between 06 and 07. I don't know if that makes any sense. Between lieutenant colonel and colonel is bigger than between colonel and that first star, second. I think the point people are trying to make when they say that, or at least what I've read, is the step up is a little bit sooner than most people think. By the time if you're going to be an 06, you've got what it takes to be an 07, that first star, second star.
No, you don't.
Okay, not at all. So good.
No.
Yes, set me straight. At least in the Air Force, is it?
At least, yeah. And I can only speak from the Air Force side of the house. It's a heck of a lot easier to make 06 than it is to make 07.
Okay.
1 in 100 officer commissioned will make 1 star.
Wow. That is a small number.
Yes. And 1 in 40 or 50 will make colonel.
Okay. So yeah, just numerically, it's not even the same. I guess the point people were trying to make was that if you can get to that job of being a squadron commander, a wing commander, at a certain point, the people are, I don't want to say self-identified, but the people that are going to move on beyond that, they've already demonstrated they have what it takes. It's just you're going in different roles. Now you're working in a joint role. You're working with other services, other countries.
There's a lot to be said for that.
Okay.
And I don't think it's changed much since I was there. You can get promoted to 2 stars based on your performance, but you can't go past 2 stars based on performance only.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And going from 1 to 2 is as hard as going from colonel to 1.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
So it becomes a very small world at that point.
Very small world.
So you went from 1 to 2, and that's when you went to, was it Norway?
Norway.
Norway. How was Norway?
I hated it.
Really?
Yep.
Just the weather, the job?
The job, it was a NATO job, and it wasn't challenging.
Okay. No flying, I'm
No
guessing.
flying, except for my one MiG-29 slot, that I got.
Okay.
But at the time, the chief of the Air Force, General Fogelman, he realized that we were not doing well in the joint world, in the joint arena. We were not sending our best and brightest to the joint world. We were keeping them in-house.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so we were getting killed in the joint world in terms of guys getting to be a J3 or
If you're not sending your best people there, they're not going to advance beyond that.
Right. So I got sent there because he had decided to change how the Air Force was doing stuff. Because I had worked for him. He was my boss in the first job in the Pentagon. Then he came over while I was at Kunsan. He was my boss at 7th Air Force. So we knew each other very, very well. We still know each other. We still communicate. But he says, Grumpy, I want you to go do this. You're not going to probably like it, but I'm trying to do this with all of our NATO and joint billets. Is put first teamers in, not second stringers, which is what we've been doing for decades.
Okay.
So, okay, whatever you ask, I'll go. So I went. The job was, as I say, not challenging. The hardest part was went to work in a cave.
Really? An actual cave?
An actual cave. So in the wintertime, I'd go to work in the dark, and I'd come home in the dark. It reminded me too much of Tonopah.
Only no F-117s.
And the winter in Norway is long and dark and cold.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot to do in Stavanger. They'd moved the headquarters out of Oslo.
Okay.
A couple of years prior to me getting there. So you didn't have the bustling city of Oslo and all the things you have in the capital.
Yeah.
So it wasn't exactly a great time.
I've read and I've heard that once you put on a star or 2 stars, no one will ever tell you the truth again. You're always going to get a filtered version when you're speaking to even the frontline folks. Is that an accurate statement? Did you feel that it became tough to...
I would say it's accurate until or unless they get to know you.
Okay. You have to build that trust. And how do you do that? You can't do that wave tops. You have to get in people's chili and
You have to do that face to face.
Yeah.
And not just through face to face, but your actions as well as your words. You can say one thing and do another, and they see that.
Yeah.
So General Fogelman always, he had he still is a major history buff, even though he's an academy graduate. He had some great sayings from previous warfighters through the eons and how to do things with folks. And so I tried to learn as much from him as I could and then try to transfer that to other people. And one of the basics is don't ask somebody else that works for you to do something that you aren't willing to do yourself.
And I'm assuming when folks get to that level, sometimes they will do that just without thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're expecting other people to accept risks they themselves would not.
Right.
Gotcha. After Norway, what was next?
Norfolk.
Back to Norfolk, or to Norfolk. Was it the first time? Yeah, probably the first time.
That was the only time, yeah.
First and only time. You mentioned it before a moment ago. You lived on base.
Yes.
I know the homes because we would walk. My family and I. My helicopter squadron was not too far from there. So I always wondered who lived there. Now I know.
Yeah, General Keane was in the other half of the house we lived in. The guy next to us was Ed Jim Bastiani.
Okay.
He was a submariner.
Oh, wow.
I always accused him of breathing his own gas too much. He was easy to pull his chain.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The SINC, or the commander at that time, was Hal Gaiman, Navy boat driver.
Okay.
a black shoe guy, really neat guy. And that's where I got crosswise with my chief, because I saw what Admiral Gaiman was trying to do with the joint forces. And Air Force was only coming along kicking and screaming. So the chief asked me, he said, after you've been there for a couple of months, come up and tell me what you think. Well, I didn't know at the time, but he and Admiral Gaiman had clashed numerous times in the Pentagon.
Oh, okay.
So I went up and told him, and I said, sir, we're with Air Force. You know, I had the NATO thing. You were in NATO when I was over there. You were my boss in NATO, my Air Force boss. And now I'm down there, and we're doing it wrong. Admiral Gaiman is on the right path, and we are not.
Did not want to hear that.
That was it.
Really?
That was it.
Okay.
He didn't like my answer. He said, sir, I'm just telling you. You asked my opinion. My opinion is we're doing it wrong, the Air Force, the Navy. Admiral Gaiman's got it right in the joint world.
Okay.
We don't. Ooh, bad news. Oh, well.
Gotcha. So you retired. When did you retire from the Air Force?
Officially 1 January 2000.
Okay. From your bio, I'm seeing 3,600 hours, like you mentioned, F-105, A-7, F-16, F-117, and a couple of the other types sprinkled in there. You said the F-16 was the favorite.
Yep.
Least favorite jet? Or airplane, I guess I should say. If you say the helicopter, it's okay. I won't get offended.
No. I enjoyed Black Hawk. I really did. It was fun.
It's a different way to live. Lower and slower, for sure.
Probably the least favorite, T-37 maybe.
Totally fair, yeah.
What you don't see in my bio there is B-52 time.
Yep.
B-1 time.
B-1, yeah.
Yep.
That's an awesome airplane.
F-15E, F-15C. I didn't do F-111.
Okay.
By the time I got to where I could do that, they'd retired them all. Of course, I did a F-4 Weasel G back seat, and then I did the front seat F-4F German version.
Really?
Yep.
Fine with the Germans.
We had a German squadron in Holloman.
Yeah, the training squadron.
And they kept bugging me, you need to get some F-4 time on you. So I ain't doing it in the back seat. Well, we'll teach you how to do it from the front. I crawled in there. I said, who invented this cockpit? That was awful.
Really?
Oh, it was awful. I don't see how we ever did anything right in that airplane.
Wow. There were a lot of F-4s, too.
Just proves you put a big enough engine on it, you can fly a brick.
Anything will fly, yeah. Wow. Any other types I might have missed? I'm just going through the big ones, but the flight in the MiG-29. I'm sure a bunch of other FAM flight, just one-off flights in a lot of different aircraft, I'm guessing.
Well, that's about it. You know, the only one airplane I couldn't land, B-52.
B-52.
Could not land it. Because there was a crosswind at Barksdale.
Uh-huh.
And crosswind landing in a B-52 is not anything like you and I or most pilots are used to. If you don't crab into the wind, you point the nose into the wind, and they move the landing gear around.
I've heard that, yeah.
So you're flying down final, wings level, looking away from the runway.
Yeah.
It ain't right. It ain't right.
Is it because you can't go?
You can't drop a wing.
Can't drop a wing because
You'll drag a wing.
You drag a wingtip. Yeah, exactly. We used to have B-52s come into, because one of the positions, so the backseaters that trained at Pensacola, they have like a little show and tell day for the kids basically, and they bring a C-130 in, a B-1, an F-15, basically everything that they could fly in the back of, and they won't let the B-52, specifically won't let the B-52 come into NAS Pensacola anymore because they would take out too many lights with the wingtip outriggers.
I can believe it.
And the base CO was like, I cannot literally afford to keep fixing these things every time they come in every 6 months. So it's a big airplane.
They put me in the left seat because
wow.
This was the B-52 weapons school guys. I went down to see them and fly with them and see how they're doing.
Okay.
So they put me in the left seat. Okay. So we'll taxi it out for you because we don't want you to hit anything. Basically. Okay, fine. Get it on the runway. All right, they got it on the runway, so got it lined up. Now the co-pilot runs the throttles for you. Your pilot can't run the throttles. Okay, whatever you say. And you don't rotate. What? No, when we get to this speed, we'll tell you say push forward on the yoke. What? And the airplane just sort of levitates.
Oh, gosh.
And if you ever watch one take off, it sort of levitates, and then the nose comes down like that.
Yeah.
As it gains
It does
airspeed.
not pitch
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't rotate.
That's so strange.
Yeah.
I've read recently they're going to re-engine the airplanes, and they're going to go on for, it seems like, a long time.
But they're putting new used engines on it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a new.
No.
Okay.
Rather than putting 4 nice fans on it,
Yeah.
they're putting 8 smaller fan jets on it. At least they're getting away from the turbojet.
Sure. Interesting. I don't know anything more about it than what I've read online, but interesting. Okay, so the thing I wanted to make sure I circled back to, you have built not one, but 2 airplanes. The RV-10 that you still have, and then the RV-8.
Oh, you forgot? I forgot one other one, too. The one other one I really enjoyed flying.
What's the other one?
B-29.
Oh, that you flew. Okay, you're talking about how flight, was it Fifi?
Fifi.
Fifi. How much flight time do you have in Fifi?
Half an hour.
That's more than I have. When was that?
94? At
Okay.
Whiteman, Missouri, when they had the B-2 ceremony, the first B-2 coming into Whiteman.
Uh-huh.
They had a big air show up there, and they had Fifi there.
Okay.
So I'm up there. I bring a stealth up, right? You know, stealth fighter comes up to the stealth bomber because the wing commander is a good friend.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, we're at the bar. He and I are standing at the bar having a drink. I see a couple of older guys down the end of the bar, B-29 patch. Oh, B-29, let's go down. So I went down and started talking to him about, Dad used to fly it in the Pacific and da-da-da-da. And, he used to talk about how it flew and everything. They looked, says, you want to go fly in the morning? So the wing commander and I both showed up, base ops. We hop in Fifi with them. Of course, they won't let us take off and land. That's understandable. Get airborne, get the flaps up. All right, who's first in the seat? So I was first in the seat, got a half hour at the controls. Then we swapped and then came back and landed. So we got an hour of airtime, the 2 of us, with the pilot, the co-pilot, and the flight engineer. Because you need a flight engineer to run
the engines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite an. So I got home, I got down, and I ran to base ops, and I called my dad. And I said, Dad, you'll never guess, because we didn't have cell phones, right? So,
Sure.
never guess what I just did. He said, what'd you do? I said, I just flew in a B-29. Silence. Dad, I just flew in Fifi, the B-29. You're kidding me. So I said, it flew just like you said it did.
How did it fly? Was it real heavy on the controls?
It's heavy it's heavy.
Okay. Probably in all axes.
Yeah, but not as heavy as I was expecting. Now, Dad said when they would take off out at Tinian and they'd be fully over max gross with bombs and fuel and whatnot, said it was a beast to get that baby airborne at the end of the runway. You went to the end of the runway and rotated. Don't rotate before then, or you'll end up in the ocean.
Yeah.
Sort of like a 105 on takeoff. You didn't rotate.
Yeah.
You got to the end of the runway and pull back on the stick.
Wow.
But I'd forgotten about the B-29.
Okay. No, that's an awesome story. Why the RV-10?
Well, I had a 182, a 57 model, if you remember that.
I do remember. Oh my gosh, I do remember that airplane. Yeah.
That I bought from my old Air Force buddy down in Texas, because I couldn't stand it when I got here and wasn't flying. I had to get back in flying. So I bought his 182, and I flew it for, 3 or 4 years, whatever. And part of the deal was he'd come up here once a year. He and his wife would fly up, stay with us for a couple of days. We'd drink and eat, and we'd do the annual in the 182. So we were up, I think it was about 04 time, somewhere in there. And I said, Paul, start looking for me for a Cessna 210, please. What do you want a Cessna 210 for? So I said, go faster. This 182 is 125 knots. I don't care what you do to it. It's not going any faster. No autopilot, and very, very, it had a Garmin 430 in it, but that was it. He says, if I can't find you a good one, it's still a 25-year-old airplane. So let's build an RV-10. I said, what are you talking about? What is an RV-10? I didn't know anything about vans. Didn't know very much about vans. So we go to the internet, pull it up, see pictures. Oh, it's a 4-place. It goes as fast as. I said, I don't know anything about building airplanes. He said, I'll teach you. He had built 2 RV-6s by that time.
Okay.
He says, vans are all the same way, just different scale. Well, I don't have any tools. He said, we'll build it down there in my hangar in Texas. So we'll build it. I'll help you along, and I will teach you everything you need to know about maintaining that airplane for the rest of your, as long as you own it. So we did. I built it. Every opportunity to get away from my job at Arnold, long weekends, take a week off, a vacation, whatever. I was down there. I had my own room in their house.
Wow.
And we went through that whole process, and he and his good friend down there taught me how to build that airplane. Did first flight down there. Got the 40 hours done and brought back up here to finish. You think it's finished? No, it's not. Lots of stuff to do. And then we got it painted. And I didn't call it finished until after we'd gotten it painted.
Yep.
And it's still the airplane I like to travel in.
Heck yeah.
It's a good traveling airplane. Deshay and I went to Texas last spring in it. We're down there with one gas stop. We're down there in 4.5 hours of flying time versus 2 days of driving.
Or not even talking about the airlines. Yeah.
No.
Wow. That's wonderful.
The only problem is, you got to deal with the weather sometimes. She doesn't like flying in the clouds. She goes like this with her book or whatever if we get in the clouds.
Yeah. No, I can understand that.
So it's a great airplane. It's a good traveling airplane. It's got an interesting CG issue with it if you load it up in the back seats or baggage compartment and its fuel burns off, because fuel is on the head of the spar. So as fuel burns down, you start moving CG aft. So you got to be careful about what you put in it and how much fuel you'll come back to land with.
Absolutely. So you can get into an aft CG. Did you discover that in flight test, or was that something that was a known issue with the RV-10?
It's a known.
Okay.
So once you do weight and balance on it and you start playing with the weight and balance, you go, oh, okay. Because you got to play with your own particular airplane's CG envelope.
Okay. That's fair. Why? I know you built an RV-8 that you had for it was you and ET, right?
No, it was me and Dave Holmes.
Dave Holmes, Dr. Holmes. Okay. Yeah. Awesome airplane. I appreciate the one time you took me up in it. Really, really fun.
That airplane, if my RV-10 was let's call the RV-10 is a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. The RV-8 was a 9.9.
You would call the 10 a 5? I thought that.
Well, I'm trying to show you the comparison of the quality of the build.
Really?
Because I learned so much in the 10 that I translated over into the 8.
Okay.
The 10, I was a real novice in electrical and wiring and stuff like that.
Okay.
The 8, it took me 6 weeks to wire the 8. But it is perfect in terms of how all the wires are run, all wires are labeled, how you connect. I have one grounding plug, if you will. I'll run all things electrical to it, and then it's connected to the negative post of the battery. I don't do that. I didn't do that in my 10. So I've got
multiple grounds,
and I get some spurious noise and
Yep.
inputs and stuff because I didn't know any better.
Yep.
Of course, we overhauled that engine too. We bought the engine at salvage. Had to put a new crankshaft in it and one new cylinder. And Steve Lawton taught me how to do
I did not know that.
Yep.
Okay.
And had to buy a new prop because the prop got torn when it was on a Velocity.
Yes.
And the guy had the door come open on takeoff, and he flew into the trees trying
Oh
to
my
wrestle
gosh.
with the door.
Did he survive?
Yeah, he survived. Got injured, but
Thank God.
totaled the airplane.
Of course.
The engine had 100 hours on it. And it had been back to the factory once about 80 hours for it wasn't making power, and they couldn't find anything wrong with it.
Okay.
So we rebuilt the engine, got a new prop, decided to put Garmin avionics in it. We were toss up between Garmin or what's the other one?
Dynon?
Dynon.
Okay.
So in the RV-8, I took all of those things I wish I'd done differently in the 10 and did them in the 8.
Okay.
So whether it's electrical or panel installation or access to the panel, stuff behind the panel, and the 8's pretty small up there, as you know, because it's not a side-by-side. So you don't have a lot of space to work with behind the panel. So I made it so that you could actually drop boxes down and change out boxes if you had to.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maintainability is so important, especially when you built the thing yourself. You can design that in if you know how to.
Right. And if you think about it,
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to know how, and you have to think.
Right.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed building the 8, and it was so much fun to fly.
It was a very capable instrument airplane,
Yes.
too. Very, very capable. You could shoot precision GPS approaches, right?
Right.
Yeah. Who'd you sell it to?
Retired airline guy in Seattle.
Oh, wow. So it's out on the West Coast now?
And he loved it. He came here and bought it. Then came back and picked it up, and I checked him out in it. And then he flew it out there, and he and his wife been all over the Northwest out there. And he is now in the final stages of an RV-14 builder assist.
Interesting.
And he said, the only reason I'm doing that is because my wife got tired of looking at the back of my head.
Yeah. I had thought about that when we were looking for R6. Yeah, you're kind of marooned in the back when you're the back seater.
Yep. And so he's building the 14.
Okay.
And he's already got a guy standing waiting
Wants
to buy the 8.
I was about to ask. Okay, never
Yep.
mind.
Yep.
Hoping to bring it back to Tennessee.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we're going to quack.
Yeah. That's great, though. I mean, I'm sure he's going to be happy with that 14. Big airplane.
And he's taken a lot, because I gave him my whole builder's book, of how I did it and what I did, et cetera. And then for a long time, he would call me, once every week or 10 days. How do you do, why'd you do this? That kind of stuff. So he's now incorporating a lot of that stuff into his 14 as he's building it.
Good. One of the most, I might not be memorable to you, it was definitely memorable to me. One of my most memorable early flights in our RV-6. Do you remember when Rusey Moore passed away? Mm-hmm. Rusey Moore was a pilot for Rodney.
That's right.
Yeah, flying I think it was a Bell 206. But
yep.
When he passed away, that was right before my second deployment to Bahrain. And so I purchased the RV-6. I think I'd flown it twice in formation before that day with a friend in a Bonanza and a friend in a 172. And I knew I had to get the airplane back to Tennessee. It, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, worked out that was right before that memorial. I was coming back either way before that deployment. So flew the airplane home a little bit early. The weather was not that great that day. I think it was a Saturday.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, the weather was.
It was lower.
Yeah, lower than we had planned on.
It was, and I will never forget because the way I describe this when I tell this story to everyone was. Let's see. I'm trying to remember who was in lead, but it was a 172 pilot. It's one of the guys down at Redstone. So I'm pretty sure he flew the Stealth Hawk. Rodney, Comanche guy.
Yep.
Some of the other folks down there. So Rodney was in his F-1 rocket that he's now sold. RV-6, Kerry Mills, I believe he has some time in that other helicopter as well. And then you're in the slot in the RV-8, and there's my little dumb butt hanging on the left wing there. I'm the only guy that doesn't have that level of experience, proficiency. The flyover looked great. I looked at the video recently. It was awesome. But looking back at it, it was a lot for me. I'm flying cross cockpit. I think it was the first 6 ship I ever did. Nothing bad happened, of course. I remember it was just I think it was hopefully a great way to honor Rusey. He was a great guy. I remember him really well. Yeah. A very kind individual, and obviously very sad what happened. But I'll never forget looking over and seeing the RV-8. It was a cool flight for sure. So
I love flying formation. I don't get the chance to do it very much.
Are there a lot of folks around here that you can fly form with?
I'll fly with Rodney anytime.
Okay.
And I'll fly with Kerry, but I haven't seen Kerry in a while.
Yeah, I think he went back to Spirit. I think
he did.
Yeah.
And then the only other person that I trust to fly formation with is E.T., Tony.
How's he doing?
He's doing good, except he tore his ACL skiing a couple of weeks ago, so he's down for the count for a while.
Oh, man.
But E.T., I trust Tony. In fact, we've done a number of formation flights together with him and like Paul, my hangar mate, in the 182 with E.T. doing the flying.
Oh, nice. When we get done with this, I'll tell you a formation story that happened to me recently. I didn't bring the pictures, but I'll tell you that later. I always like to kind of wrap these up by asking, what did I miss? What did I not ask about? I know I'm asking about your entire aviation career, and it's not done yet. You're still flying your RV-10 and still doing a bunch of flight instruction. But anything that I missed or didn't ask about, anything at all, I kind of want to leave the last point to you. Then I have one last question I'll ask at the end.
Well, I still instruct because I enjoy doing it, but I'm very selective about who and what I'll instruct with. I've been very fortunate. Everybody I put up for check rides they've passed their check rides, and that includes commercial and CFI. Yeah. But The way I go now is if you want me to teach you basic flying, you're working on your private, I have some criteria you have to meet before I will do it. Same thing for instruments. In what I found is I'm not in it for the money, for one, so I'm not going to be out here spinning my wheels if you haven't prepared for flying. So now if you want to get your private, you have to complete the ground school and taken the test and passed it before I'll even start with you. And the same thing for instruments. The other thing I do on instruments is you'll go get some simulator time before we get in the air. Because why waste time in the air trying to teach cross checks when you can do it in a simulator at a fraction of the cost? And
Absolutely.
you can reset and do it over again, do it over again, do it over again. So, but for the private, you got to have completed the exam and passed the private pilot exam before we'll take the first flight. And then you have to promise me, part of the deal is you'll go take a spin training lesson with Catherine either before or as soon as you get your private, because there's so much training to be had there. So that's why, I don't have a primary student right now. And, what am I doing? I do BFRs or instrument recurrency, one-off type stuff. And part of the reason is both of Doc's rental airplanes are down too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned not being in it for the money. I have a friend up in Nashville, and his I think it's his stepson is looking into getting into aviation. He's a high school student. He wants to do it all. He wants to do it now. He wants to do it quickly. And I think he went up to Smyrna. I won't name the school, but there's a school up, I jokingly call it a puppy mill type situation. And he debriefed my friend, who then debriefed me on the lesson and some of the stuff. And I just kind of shook my head. And I was like, man, you need to find, I say this with all respect, some old guy that doesn't care about it for the money. You need to find someone that really wants to teach you the right way.
Right. And not fill a square.
Yes. And the other thing is he wants to do it very quickly. I'm like, what are you rushing for? If this is something you love, it's going to be part of your life forever. You need to fly in the summer, in the spring, in the winter, in the fall. You need to see, the state of Tennessee and go beyond that. What is the rush? And do it the right way. You want to fly with someone that cares about you, not about, like you said, filling a square or making money so they can go onto the airlines. There's nothing wrong with going on the airlines. But you can tell from a primary flight instructor's perspective, do they really care about you, or are they more focused on what they get out of the event? So I hope that's, I don't know, maybe that's.
And that's what where I have the problem with a lot of the MTSU instructors.
Yeah.
They're just building time to get to that next level, and that may be their only source of income, so it doesn't bother them if they have to repeat a lesson 3 times. That's not me. I don't do it that way.
Nope, and that's not the way it should be done. So.
And I have turned off one student. Wasn't prepared. Said no. Until you can prepare yourself, we're not flying anymore.
Standard is here. You come up to it. It doesn't come down to you. But that standard, I'm guessing is probably coming from a place what's important. You're not going to waste your time. Why should you? So, rise to the standard or find something else to do.
Right.
Or find someone else to fly with, I suppose.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you again so very much for taking the time. I think I say taking the time. This has been like 4 or 5. I don't know how long it's been, but truly, I really do appreciate you spending the time to sit down and talk with me. It may not seem interesting to you. This is incredibly interesting to me. You've seen such a cool cross section of airplanes, and I say seen. It's not, and continue to fly. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you telling a bunch of stories. It was very, very rewarding for me. So thanks again.
Well, I didn't know what to expect. And I thought, well, we're probably done in 2 hours. But
this is my longest one by far, by the way.
You kept fishing me out more stories. Well, let me tell you about that one. Oh. It was fun. It was good.
Well, good. Thank you. And that's kind of the goal. Like the guys hanging out this morning chatting about flying. That's what I'm trying to capture and share with people. And so many people, if they're not at an airport, I was rambling about this yesterday about fences around airports. Those keep out the honest people. It keeps the people out that should be here, should get exposure to it and realize what a wonderful career, hobby, whatever you want to call it, aviation is for so many people. So this is my way of trying to share that with folks that don't get to be on the inside and don't get to know cool folks like you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So that's my hope.
If they don't get exposed to it, they'll never know.
Yep. And there are a couple times where I would ask certain things and I would just assume, oh yeah, you did this and that. No. The flight training that I went through is different than the flight training the kids going through 5 years later are getting. So it is a world apart from, and I say this with respect, the foundational skills that were taught back in the day. It saddens me that we get away from them. Certain things we've gotten away from and we've had accidents and we go back to them. But why did we have to get away from them in the first place? And so I don't know what the answer is to that question, but I'm the guy that spends a long time briefing, clearly. Tries to, a 1.5 for me is a 1.8. We're going to fly, I can fly 0.3 extra when I fly with a student. I have other instructors that go the other way and fly a 1.2. Screw them. We're going to get all the flight time and then we're going to have a long, thorough debrief. Hopefully try to pass the lessons. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or not. I'm trying.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I would make a suggestion, you may be doing it anyway, is
please
debrief in the air on the spot.
Yep, absolutely.
If you wait to get on the ground to cover it, they will have forgotten what they did or what you were trying to get them to do.
Yes.
Nothing works better than teaching that moment in the air. That wasn't right. Let's do that again. Here's what you do. Here's the sight picture. Here's what you do.
And the thing I try to do, you're absolutely right. When I can, and usually, I'm the one on the controls. They're in the back seat talking through radio calls or talking through an approach or what have you. But if I can't say it in that moment because comms are busy, because we're in actual IMC, whatever, hey man, we'll talk about that later. And so then I have to force myself. I have to circle back to it and make sure we debrief it later. As opposed to, I've seen some garbage grade sheets, very few comments, nothing of value. And I know the debrief probably was the same and the brief was probably the same. Something. Try to get it in the moment, but if I can't, I have to circle back to it and get it later.
Yeah, and the problem with that is you don't always remember what it is you need to get back to.
No, you don't. No, not at all. That's very true.
Yeah.
Very, very true. Well, anything else before we wrap up?
I think it's good. Thank you.
Cool. If you think of any other stories or anything sometime, I can either figure out a way to add them in or something. But thanks again.
There's other stories, but I don't think we need to add them.
Well, perfect. That's the great way to end it. Thank you again.
You're welcome.